Our next guest in the Mindset Shift is Nina Gallagher, Managing Director of Accenture UK and Ireland. She has led an astonishing career in business, working for companies such as the Nielsen Company, a market research organisation, and media consultancy Media Audits. She then moved on to Accenture in 2006, where she has spent over 14 years as Managing Director. Nina now works with leading global consumer good clients to find new ways to engage, acquire service and reward customers to expand market share.
Welcome to the Mindset Shift. Great to have you on the programme.
Tim, thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you today.
So the Mindset Shift is a different type of business podcast in that we really want to find out about the individual, about what makes this individual, and then we can talk to them, at later stages in the podcast about your business career. So tell me about your background, where you're from, and those type of things that people really are interested in finding out.
So I'm from Dublin, born in Dublin, and have lived in Dublin most of my life. I grew up in Sutton in the north side, and when I was about 7 years old, my parents moved to Africa, actually. My dad was working for the European Union, so lived in Africa, did my primary education there. And then I came home to boarding school in Alex in Milltown. So that was an amazing experience, obviously being a boarder. And then once I finished school, I went to Trinity to study economics and geography, which was great. So that's just kind of a little bit about my background.
So talk to me about the family. So were you the only child, or had you other siblings?
No, I've two brothers and a sister. So myself and my kind of next brother are very similar in age. So there's a year and a half between us. And then there's a big gap in our family. So I have an older brother and sister, about 10, 12 years older. So, so we're, my mum always says it was like raising two families.
And you said your dad worked in the European Union. So that was fascinating.
Yeah. Absolutely. We got to move all over Africa. We lived in Lesotho, which is a small country surrounded by South Africa. We lived in Malawi, and we also lived in Rwanda. I don't know if you remember the genocide and the atrocities that happened there. Well, we were living in Rwanda when that happened. And my dad happened to be there. Luckily, my mum she was over in Ireland visiting us, so she didn't have to witness that. But yeah, that's certainly a period of our lives that remains with us, actually.
I'll talk to you a little bit about that genocide, because I'm very familiar with it, because a friend of mine, a journalist, visited Rwanda not very soon after it had finished, and the tragedy and the atrocities were horrific. But what was it like, as a 7-year-old to leave Ireland, to go to Africa? Because Africa has kind of this sort of vision of beauty in so many different ways from that point of view. But as a 7-year-old, can you comprehend what you're doing, or is it just, I'm going with mom and dad, we're moving?
Yeah, it was just one big adventure. So we started off, we went to live in Egypt initially for about 3 or 4 months. And I remember that so well, going to visit the pyramids. And I just remember the food, creme caramel was a big thing. And I just have such happy memories of that time. And then going to live in Lesotho, it's just sunshine, growing up there. It was just such a wonderful experience. Yeah. So I don't think I necessarily thought, oh, wow, I'm going to go live in Africa. But my whole childhood was really special because of that.
And what was it like going to school there? You talked about you did your primary education in Africa. What was that like for you?
For me, it was just normal, because I guess I was so young, I didn't really think anything different. I'm friendly with so many of them still on Facebook, which is amazing, even some of my teachers. And it's just lovely to see where they are in their lives now. But yeah, it was just lovely.
And were the 4 siblings in Africa? So the 10-year-old, the people with your older siblings, obviously, were they there as well?
So my sister came with us. My mother insisted that she came, and my older brother was in UCD at the time, so he stayed behind. And my sister then since met somebody, a South African, so she lives in South Africa now. So, and then myself and my brother, who's close in age, obviously the two of us were there going through school together.
Do you ever talk to your sister, because it was a different experience for her? So she's sort of 16 or 17 at that point in time.
Exactly.
And you're 7. So it is a different context for her to make the move than it is for you.
Oh, she bawled her eyes out, didn't want to go. Absolutely. My mum had to drag her there. She'll kill me if she ever watches this. But she's a lovely life there now. She lives by the sea. It's a beautiful climate. Obviously with COVID, it's a challenge because she hasn't been able to come home and see us. But it's great with Zoom technology and all of those different things. So it was definitely a different experience for her.
And did she stay in South Africa when she met her husband? So she didn't come back.
Exactly. She met him, I guess, maybe 3-4 years after we moved there, and they got married very young. They had children very young, and now actually she has 2 of her children living in Ireland. So one is down in Kerry, in Killorglin, and then the other is living in Clifton. So, and then the 3rd child, and he's still in South Africa.
Yeah, 2 great locations, aren't they? I mean, they're very similar in some ways, Killorglin and Clifton, and then very different in other ways,
Exactly.
You then came back to boarding school. So I assume primary school was just day school in Africa.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so then you come back and you're back in Dublin, you're in Milltown, and you're going to Alex. And what was it like to be in boarding school? Because when I talk to people who have experienced boarding school, I make the point that it's not common. Not everybody went to boarding school. Most predominantly people went to day school. So talk to me about what it was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I look back, I absolutely love boarding school. It's becomes everybody is your family. Boarding school, your friends, we're all in the same boat, and you make friends for life. And I'm friendly with all of the girls still from my year, so it's fantastic. Obviously, there were the times where you're homesick, you're missing your family, and I always remember leaving my parents in Africa and having to go back to boarding school, knowing I wouldn't see them for a number of months. That was always really hard. And, I would have spent the weekends in school, whereas a lot of my friends would go home for the weekend. So they were some of the kind of boarding was just fantastic.
But your parents were in Africa during this time, so you didn't get to see them at weekends. So
no.
Who did you see?
So my older brother, that is kind of 12 years older, was living in Dublin, and I'd go and stay with him once a month. So that, it was great because he was family. He had 5 children, quite young. So they were all babies, and I swore to myself I would never have children when I used to see the chaos in the house. But I ended up having 2 of my own. But yeah, he had 5.
It's interesting when we look at different circumstances, how our lenses, at different points in time in our journey completely changes. As you say, you have 2 children now, and at that point then you're adamant, I will never have children. I want my life to be structured and perfect, and all of a sudden, no chaotic movements.
No. But yeah, so it was great to have a family, obviously, for that. And then as kind of I got a little bit older, I'd go and stay with friends. So you had a list of who you could go and stay with, and their parents really looked after me, and I got to really know their families. So yeah, that was great.
You mentioned you were a monthly boarder in the sense that you were in for a month and out at one weekend. So what did you do to pass the time for the month when you weren't actually studying?
Sport was a big thing for me. So we were, there was always a hockey match on a Saturday or extra training. And they'd put on like lots of events. So we'd go to the Natural History Museum or something. And yeah, I don't remember the weekends being long or a drag. There was always something to do. And there were a group of us that were always there at the weekends. So we'd all hang out and listen to music and, get up to no good.
You mentioned earlier that sport was important to you, and you just advised us here of hockey. So was hockey the main sport, or were there other sports?
Hockey was my number one sport. I was also big into the tennis as well, but hockey during the winter, tennis during the summer. And I was quite competitive, so I played under 16 Leinsters, and then when I hit under 18, I got onto the Irish. Basically the Irish team. So that was fantastic. And all my focus then, of course, was hockey and training and getting fit for the games and all of that.
So to play for Ireland, at under 18 is an amazing achievement. Anybody who's played for their country in any sport, it's just the pinnacle of a sports person's dream. So what was it like for you, first of all, and then obviously for your family and your friends?
It was everything to me at the time. All I was working towards was getting picked for that team. And then obviously when it happened, I was absolutely thrilled. But, my parents were, I think, really proud of me. They managed to come home to see some of the games, which was fantastic, having them there on the sideline supporting me. So, it was brilliant, and I loved every minute of it.
What was the difference in, I suppose, this challenge for you from playing for Leinster, which is a big step up, like Leinster are very strong in hockey and have always been very strong in hockey, but then to play for your country, was there a big step up, or was it just an easy step for you?
No, it was a big step up, and, there were some amazing players on that team. I always remember the Ulster girls were really, really good. It felt like they were nearly at another level. But it was, there was a lot of expectations around your training, and you just had to be fully committed to it. But, I suppose I was, and I was lucky I had the time being in school and, having the pitch around the corner, literally, or just on the ground. So I was able to go out and practice and I had super hockey coaches in school. They really supported us and helped us.
Many people who are talented so young in sport, their education kind of gets in the way. Was that a challenge for you?
Oh, gosh, it was all about hockey. I was really not focused on the studies. But, the one thing I always look back on from Alex as a school was there was this expectation that, which university are you going to, as opposed to, are you going to university? And they really build your confidence and make you feel you can achieve anything. And for me, then, it was okay, let's work out where you can go based on what grades we think you're going to get. And I got into Trinity, which was perfect.
Before we talk about your journey in Trinity, we mentioned at the start about your dad, being a part of the European Union, working for the European Union, and he was in Rwanda at the time of the genocide. You had said your mom had come home, but your dad was still there. Give me your lens of it at that point. This was a really atrocious genocide. It was horrific what went on in that country, and so sad for the people who lost their lives in horrific circumstances. But your dad is over there. So talk to me about your fears, your concerns, how much you were aware of it.
100% aware of it. I was in Trinity at the time, and I remember there was a number of my professors who obviously knew about it, and they were just really interested to see how everybody was, and they were very, very supportive. We couldn't get through to him, so the phone lines were down. My mother didn't know whether to fly to South Africa, because we knew they were trying to get him out, but he was, would it be South Africa he'd get to, or would it be Europe? And we were just so worried, obviously, about everything and about him. So it went on for a couple of weeks, and then he did get out, but he was very traumatized afterwards. It really changed him. We really noticed he became so much more affectionate afterwards. Not saying that he wasn't. My dad's fabulous. But, always kissing us and hugging us, because I think, he just realized how precious life is from the whole experience. And, and it was devastating for him not knowing, about his colleagues. And And people lost lives that he worked with. So that really was awful. Yeah.
It's interesting to hear that, that he changed. I mean, the word we would use, so he pivoted, but not that he wasn't affectionate, pre that traumatic experience, but it was a different affection because, Irish parents, particularly Irish men at that point in time, showed their affection in, not necessarily the way, as you say, hugs and kisses today, but in a different way.
Yeah.
That was very visible though, wasn't it to you?
Really visible to me. And I don't think I've ever really talked about it with my siblings and asked what they thought. But I particularly noticed that, he was traumatized and I guess just thankful for us and, appreciating life every, and the things that matter. What matters in life is your friends, your family, your health. And so for him, that was, his way of showing it, I suppose.
Here, I mean, just visualize a successful businessman, doing a very important job for the European Union, and he's thrown into this chaotic, awful, obscene world for a period of time, and the impact it can have, and yet through all the mist and doom and gloom of that environment, it makes him realize that, look, it is about our family, it is about our health, and let's just make the best of that every day, which is actually something we should all remind ourselves of, because sometimes we get caught up in this world. And I know COVID has slowed it down a bit for us, but in reality, we're still caught up in the pace of the world. And your dad's experience was one to say, yes, we can do all the things we need to do, but there are really critical things, which are our family, our friends, and our own individual and our family's health. Yeah,
exactly.
Trinity. So what did you decide to study in Trinity?
So I did a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Geography.
And what was the plan? You're now in Trinity, you've come out, like you think about it, you're going into Trinity, you're a cool student, you've been in Africa, you've been a boarder, you're an international hockey player. So you're kind of cool student and, you're doing the program. But what's the plan? What do you want to do when you're going in, or what do you want to come out of? Trinity?
I had absolutely no plan, Tim. I'll be perfectly honest. It was go to college, do my degree. The first thing I did in Freshers Week was join the hockey club. So you can see my head was still there. And so I threw myself into the hockey in college. And then, obviously I worked enough. And myself and my brother then, he also went to Trinity, and he took sort of a scenic route, so he joined the same year as me, so everybody thought we were twins, and he did business economics, it was called BESS then, business economics and social studies. So the two of us were in college and we shared a flat in Bagot Street. So needless to say, we didn't make many early morning lectures.
That's interesting because, you're in Bagot Street, you're sharing your flat with your brother, in college. Talk to me about that, because that's very unusual.
Yeah, but we were always thick as thieves, the two of us, sort of really close, great friends. A lot of his friends became my friends and my friends, his friends. And we all just hung out together. It was, there was a lot of people descending on that flat, as you can imagine, particularly on a Friday night when they couldn't get a taxi home.
I'm just thinking to myself, Nina, imagine you giving your two children advice, and saying it wouldn't be, don't miss the early morning, lectures.
Yeah, I know. I'm certainly probably not in the right position to give them that sort of advice, but I do say to them, to work hard, and I kind of jest about it, but I did work hard to make sure I got my degree, and but there's more to just your studies, isn't there? And being part of the sporting community, you build friendships as well there that kind of lasted forever.
So as you go through college, when do you start sort of coming to the idea that I'm going to get into this real world, whatever this so-called real world is post-college?
I think probably fourth year, I started to think about it. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I discovered there's a program in Brussels with the European Union. It's called a stagiaire. So you do it's a 6-month training program. And my parents actually happened to be living in Brussels then, because my dad, post Rwanda, had been posted back to Brussels. So I moved to Brussels straight after university, and I did this 6-month stagiaire, which was fantastic, like brilliant, because they bring people from all over Europe. So it's kind of nearly like a big team of you, and everybody gets to know everybody, and they've all these different events, and kind of your nationality. You have a special Irish night and a French night and all these different things. So it was fantastic.
Did you move back in with your parents when you moved to Brussels?
I did. I moved, and a friend of mine came with me. So they had the two of us living with them, and I think we drove them mad because our room was a mess, and we were out all the time. But it was brilliant. Brussels is a super city.
I'm just smiling because I'm thinking of you, when you're in Alex in Middletown and you're complaining about your son's 5 children and the chaotic mess that they had in their house at that point in time, and yet you come into this serene world in Brussels of your parents with your friend and creates a very similar chaotic structure.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But they loved having us there, I suppose. It was great for them. And so I spent about a year overall in Brussels. I went on afterwards to teach English through Berlitz and earn a bit of money, which was great. And then I decided I wanted to do a master's. So I came back to Dublin and went to UCD and did a master's there. And then after that, I kind of started in the workforce.
And what was the master's on?
It was in economic studies, economic development, so all about third world. And, I was kind of thinking that was the path I wanted to go down, based on my childhood, based on my dad. And I did the master's, and I actually never went down that route in the end.
That's a common occurrence, isn't it? We have this clear vision, and then we have this concept. This is what we're going to do, and just life gets in the way sometimes, and we decide we just take a different path. So, what did you decide to move into after your masters?
So I kind of moved into the world of marketing and business, and started my first job really with Nielsen. They're a market research company, and that was just, again, as a first job, fantastic. I mean, again, loads of the people that I worked with there, I'm so friendly with. It was hard work, really hard work. But you learned so much, the training was incredible. That was really where I started my career.
And what was the sort of the day-to-day role?
It was an account executive, and then I got promoted to account manager, where you'd be reporting on kind of market share trends of a brand, for example, why they're selling more, why they're not selling more. So we had all the data to support kind of their brand's performance, and really kind of give them strategies around what they needed to do to sell more, and kind of looked at how they're performing against their competitors. So so you had lots of clients. Like, I think I had about 10. And basically you'd go into them every 8 weeks and report on, how they were doing against their competitive set.
How did you deal with the fact that sometimes the data you had to present was that they weren't doing well, and obviously sometimes they were doing well? How did you find that trust of business, because you would come from being in a world where you were in boarding school, you were in college, you went to Brussels, you were teaching a bit, went back into the masters. So it's a kind of protected world in many ways. Now you're in the trust of business. How did you find the transition?
I think it was because a number of us started together in a group. I think there were about 5 or 6 of us, and they put us through like a really rigorous, intensive training program. And you really learned how the business worked and what our role was, working with our clients. And then when you're out and you're presenting, and you could have some really senior people at those meetings, and like we were, quite junior. But it was all about telling a story. That's really what the job was take the data, the research, and turn it into some form of a story that will help them understand why they're doing well, or maybe why they're not doing so well, and what the data is saying to us, and what they need to fix to improve it moving forward. So it was really about storytelling and being able to communicate to the brand managers or the brand directors, what they needed to do.
It's brilliant advice to give people who are watching this, that storytelling is so important in so many different ways in business, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because, like we had spreadsheets, you've no idea how long, with so much data, but it was about unpicking that and saying, what is the real data points? What really matters here? And how do we communicate it back to the client so that they understand it, that it's, there's definitely some actions and things that they need to do to drive better performance for their brand and their business. And it was all about storytelling. And yeah, back then, and at that stage in my career, I wouldn't have really, thought about it through that lens. But, in my world today, everything's about storytelling and being able to effectively communicate a message.
When you moved from the account executive position to the account management position, had you management of people in that step, or was it still just broader clients?
Yeah, not really. What we tended to do was kind of double team on different clients. So, you'd work together. So there would maybe be someone a little bit more junior to you, and you'd be then passing on the training that you learned, but you didn't necessarily have a big team you were managing. Like, we weren't a massive business back then. And I think there were probably about 60 people in total working for Nielsen at that time.
So what was the next part of the journey? Where did that take you?
So the next part of my journey was I joined a company called Media Audits. So basically what we did was we looked at the efficiency and effectiveness of advertising spend. So basically we worked, for some of the biggest brands in Ireland, global brands, Irish brands, mostly kind of in the fast-moving consumer goods space, to kind of help them think about how do they better drive return on investment for their marketing spend. So we were independently hired by a client, and we critiquing what an agency was doing on their behalf. So as you can imagine, I wasn't the most loved person by those agencies, because, nobody wants to be told that actually they're not doing, they need to do something slightly better. But again, for that, I was, my kind of sort of the way I handled that was all about kind of, if there is a negative message, how do you portray that in a positive way?
Okay, I get the impression, Nina, from talking to you, that community and relationships are very important, because right today we've talked about, I've made good friends here, and we're still in touch. I'm in touch with people from Africa, Facebook, some of the teachers. So relationships are very important to you, is a perception and a belief I would have got from chatting so far. So when you take that in mind, you're talking to these agencies that you have some type of relationship with, it's sometimes you can't turn a negative into a positive. It's just as negative. So how do you deal with that?
But again, it was all about building relationships with those agencies. And, like we'd have the meeting, but we'd be well prepared in advance. I would make sure they had full sight of kind of the results and what we were saying. There would often be challenge back, saying, I feel that's not a fair reflection. So it was all about kind of going into that meeting with no surprises, and making sure that, if there were some messages that weren't particularly positive, that the agency wasn't going to be caught by surprise at the meeting. And I felt that was the best way to kind of look after that business. And I feel it worked.
I just love that line, no surprises. I work with many clients, and I make the point that, once you take out the surprises, everything is workable. The problem I find in many situations is that people arrive at meetings, or people arrive at different stages of projects and businesses, and get surprised. And then emotions take over, because you've now put me in a very difficult situation. So I love the line that, you were very focused on making sure there was no surprises. You gave them the data in advance, or as much of the data in advance as you could, but they walked in prepared for the fact that, here is your opinion based on the data. Here are the facts that you're presenting to them, but there's no surprise here. They can disagree with it, but so I just love that. I just think it's a great line that many people should listen to, because unfortunately, as I said, people get surprised in business, and that causes so many difficulties. If we could eliminate that, it would reduce the number of difficulties we have, particularly emotionally on a day-to-day. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think the most important thing for us was that we had a productive meeting where the client is sitting there and, we're helping kind of the client better understand what the issues are, what needs to be addressed. No client wants to sit through a meeting where there's a bun fight happening, absolutely no way. So yeah, for me, that was kind of the most important thing was those relationships to ensure that we kind of worked together for our client.
At this stage, you've learned a couple of different aspects of the business, from the Nielsen time and now in this role. Where did your journey move to after that?
Yeah, so that was when it all started to get very interesting. I was working in media audits, and we were a UK Irish team, and then we did have some kind of with a European presence, not really anything happening in the US. And we discovered that we were being acquired by Accenture, which for me was fantastic. I was absolutely delighted when I heard that. I had a friend from school who'd worked in Accenture, so I understood it, and I knew, it was a global firm, really great opportunities there. So I was absolutely delighted when I heard about that. What I was so surprised about was that there were a number of people who were not happy about the acquisition at all. And I'd say most of them left pretty quickly afterwards, but I'm still here 15 years later. So it was brilliant. And so that's what happened.
What excited you? I mean, obviously you had a friend there, but what excited you other than the fact that you knew somebody in the Accenture world? What was the reason, things that sort of said, whoa, this is a great opportunity for me and obviously for the firm?
Because I knew it would give me more opportunity to do something different. So, and I wasn't, not necessarily from day one, I wasn't planning that, but I kind of thought, okay, long term, what's the next phase of my career going to look like? And, you can't do that media auditing forever. And, I suppose I was already thinking, what's the next logical move for me? Is it join an agency as a media planner or buyer, or is it go industry side? And then Accenture happened, which was, right. I decided I'd make a go of it, so just knowing how big the company was, how global it was, how well thought of as a brand it was they were all fantastic things for me.
And if I contrast that with some of the people that didn't welcome the acquisition, and as you said, many of them left very soon afterwards, it just shows me though, if you have a growth mindset, there's a lot of possibilities that can develop. And if you have a closed mindset, you really restrict yourself. And, you've demonstrated to me just in casually that you had a growth mindset, it mightn't have been called growth mindset at that point in time, but you were very open to opportunities. Sadly, some people are closed, and I would always advise people, open your mind, because tomorrow brings another day and we just have to make the best of today.
Yeah.
How has your journey moved forward in Accenture?
Yeah, so I ran that business for a number of years when I was in Accenture. And what was really interesting, because I was dealing with really big advertisers, it was probably in and around 2010 at this stage. So we were in the depths of recession. But what I was noticing was all of these advertisers, while they're spending less money in traditional advertising, they're now actually investing their advertising dollars online. This was kind of a big eye-opener for me, because there was a big change happening. And so I actually transferred then into our consulting practice, and so completely moved away from the old business, recruited someone in, handed that over to focus on building our capabilities in digital and working with our clients in that space.
And that's a complete transition. You're pivoting from something that you have experience in, you have success in, obviously, and now you're into this strange world. So how did you deal with that transition?
Wow. And, even though I had been in Accenture a number of years, I'd always kind of look and go, what do they do? So all of a sudden I'm in consulting. It was a big change. But I hit the ground running. I threw myself into it. I worked really hard. I learned, how consulting works, started to work with some big Irish clients.
And obviously, you've children, coming into your world at this point, so you have to balance the work-life balance. How did you manage that? Because you're in a very like really key international firm who expect a performance from you every single day, and you have now a family as well. So how did you manage work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, obviously my husband is fantastic, and he was, we kind of shared the load. And, the kids were small and in creches and things like that. So my family were very, helpful, my parents especially. But, one thing I will say about Accenture is they know that they need to continue to support their women throughout their journey. And, they're always very supportive if you want to work from home, for example. The child was sick or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, there were definitely some late nights and things like that. But, again, you also have to have boundaries. So I, made sure I never missed a sports day. And these are sort of the things that I always share with our, women leaders that are coming through the firm to say, you've got to set yourself boundaries. Weekends were out, no working at the weekend, quality family time. And that really just worked for me.
And did you have the discipline to maintain that? Because many women I talk to, who are in business, talk about that they set out with this plan that, I'm going to have a work-life balance. I'm going to, have boundaries. I'm going to make sure I do all these things. And then over time, just the pressure of work takes over and they slip back into losing those boundaries. How did you manage to maintain your discipline?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, I don't really know, to be honest, Tim, but I did. And I think it was just having some really supportive female leaders in the business who were, also had families. And I think, everybody was in the same boat. So, yeah, I mean, it was just about maybe having to do a late night every now and then, but ensuring that I freed up those weekends for time with the kids and blocking out my calendar for the special sports day or the Christmas play or whatever it was. Yeah.
Obviously, as I said to you earlier, I get the belief that people are very important to you. So in a leadership role, how do you lead people?
Yeah, I think lead by example. I feel, I'm really passionate about building sort of our whole diversity and inclusion agenda, building, giving women the opportunity equally, all different genders and, kind of sort of backgrounds. And I think it's about leading by example, being present, being there for your people, giving feedback regularly, being supportive. And my style is quite open. I'm very inclusive. I'm quite a soft person. I wouldn't be one of those people that's quite hard. And I think for me that always works because you build a team around you. You build camaraderie. You have people that are enjoying their work but also knowing that they have an opportunity to progress their career and giving them those opportunities, giving them that kind of runway to land their promotion or their next role. So yeah, for me, it's all about, and Accenture is all about people because we are a people business. So, we get well supported, we get trained and we try and make sure that we help others around us.
What jumped out to me there was the word soft, that you're a soft person. I've always fundamentally believed that nice people win. When I started my career, it was like you had to be really hard and cynical, if you want to make it. I disagree with that at that point in time at the start of my career. And I've always fundamentally disagreed with it right throughout my career. Leaders win if they're nice. Leaders win because they care about people, and that is obviously what you've just described there about how you lead your people. That comes across very clearly to me in that sense. The last 2020 and 2021 has been dominated by COVID, and it has brought so much tragedy to individuals who've lost their lives, to families who've lost loved ones, to individuals who've lost businesses and lost employment. How have you supported your people through, the COVID era, as I would describe it?
Yeah, I mean, it hit us hard, obviously, in March. And within kind of days, we had 4,500 people from Ireland working from home. And in fact, Accenture, it was unbelievable. They managed within a matter of weeks to move 95% of a workforce of 500,000 to work remotely, which was like massive. Yeah, I mean, this has been a really challenging time for everybody. And actually, one of my roles, besides my day job, is I'm accent on family lead across the UK and Ireland. So really trying to support our families, our people. It's not just families; it's everybody's affected by this. So we've focused massively on mental health. Running mental health workshops, fitness, for example, checking in. I think that's absolutely vital, making sure, that everybody's okay. And if they're not okay, what do they need? We're providing, support for childcare, for example. So trying to do everything we can to make sure that, people are okay. So flexible working, all of those different arrangements to really try and kind of help our people through this pandemic.
You strike me as having a very positive mindset. Has your mindset shifted at any point since the pandemic? Has this pivoted in any ways?
Yeah, I do have a very positive mindset. I mean, look, I think we've all found this last year really difficult. The working from home, I really miss the small things. I miss the human interaction. I miss the coffee in the corridor. Those are the sort of things that I really miss. I think my mindset has shifted. I think actually out of this is going to come a lot of opportunity to work remotely, opportunity to do a remote role for a global brand, for example. These are the sort of opportunities Irish people now have, based on what's happened through this pandemic, where there's no more boundaries, there's no more geographic lines. People can work anywhere from anywhere in the world. And I think my mindset has shifted to say things can be done. You just need to be agile. You need to rethink what you're doing. And for us, it's just always been around being partners to our clients, helping them as trusted partners through this pandemic, because our clients have, been really struggled as well. So it's about how do we help them pivot their business and actually change their mindset in terms of what they need to do as a business to thrive throughout the pandemic.
Well, I have no doubts that you have shown throughout your life, Nina, tremendous agility, from leaving Dublin to spending time in Africa and embracing that experience, to coming back to board in Milltown, to become an international sports player, which is the pinnacle of any sporting career. To spend a number of years living with your brother in Bagot Street, which I really find fascinating, and then obviously to go through Trinity and afterwards have a very successful career. It's been a real pleasure and an honour to chat to you. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on the Mindset Shift. And I wish you the continued success as we look for the opportunities that post-COVID will present to all of us. Thank you very much, Nina.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our chat.
Thank you for watching The Mindset Shift. Don't forget to subscribe to get a new episode delivered straight to your inbox. You can do this by following the details below.